Well, hello again, Salem. This is William Legault here with Salem Digest at the Round Table, and today we're bringing you two guests, and it's really a pleasure to have both of them here. We're segueing from private citizens and regular folks into the political bigwigs now. We've got Senator Joan Lovely and Representative Paul Tucker here as we begin our political season broadcasting for the Salem elections 2021. And it's a pleasure to have you both here. Joan, how are you this morning?
Great, Bill. So great to be here. Thank you.
And Paul, it's absolutely a pleasure.
Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it. It's always good to talk to my old high school class track mate.
Yes, that was a long time ago. So we're going to jump right in. You guys have you've been in office since 2013?
Yes.
And you've been in office since 2015. Yep. So my first year on the council, my first year getting booted off the council. So, and
you did a great job.
And it was a great experience both times, winning and losing. So let's jump right in. You've both been in office for a few years now, and you've had your own experiences, and you've really bought into the political life. I mean, this is what you guys are doing now. Is there someone or some unique experience that you've had that has really brought you to where you are today, especially in the political world? Joan?
So I will tell you how I entered the foray into politics was I helped build a playground in our neighborhood. It was the same equipment that Steve, my husband, played on when he was a young boy, that hot metal slide and those couple of rubber swings. And now we have a young family and I'm taking them to the playground and I'm saying, this just doesn't work. So we got together with some neighbors and formed a little committee, a little neighborhood committee. And we worked with then Mayor Neil Harrington and then Ward 3 City Councilor John Donahue. And we over the course of a year, we worked with the planning department, we identified funds, we came up with the design, and over a weekend, we built a playground. And it's a beautiful playground. It's actually been replaced since then, so it tells you how many years have gone by. And we named it for a neighborhood matriarch, Lucia Belfiore, at the time. It's still named for her. And it was such a great experience, working with my community. It was really my first time as a young parent. That I went to Mayor Harrington and said I'd like to be appointed to a committee. So I went to the Neighborhood Improvement Advisory Committee that still exists today and worked on that for a couple of years. And then I said to my husband, I think I want to run for city council. And he said, are you crazy? Don't you remember when I was a city councilor? Because he was a councilor when we first met and all the phone calls and meetings. I said, yes, I know exactly what this entails. And so ran for this seat and had the honor to be a city councilor for 15 years. I never planned that. It happened. And that was so positive that when the Senate seat came up, I threw my hat in the ring and here we are. And I had a loss too. I ran for state rep.
Right, I remember that.
I did. I had in 2004, John Keenan and I, now president of Salem State University, ran for that seat and John won and went off. And then John and I had the pleasure to serve together his last couple of years in office before Paul came in. So that's what propelled me into this political life was a playground.
That brings two things to mind. When we were kids, back in the day, as they say, you had to be tough on those playgrounds just to use the equipment because those slides got hot on a hot day and the little what do they call the tilt that whirly thing?
Right.
They used to we used to like to throw each other off of those. The other thing that comes to mind is you have to be careful of getting on these committees because that's where you get that bite that infects you. And you get that taste of the little things that can be done.
Right.
And then maybe you want to do a little more.
That's right.
Now, Paul, you started out, of course, in the police department.
Yep.
And there's a political aspect to that, and you have to deal with the politics in life. But what drove you into deciding you wanted to be a state rep?
It definitely was a non-traditional path to politics for me. I was a police officer for 34 years, 32 of those in Salem. And when John Keenan called me to let me know that he wasn't going to run again, I had always given some thought to what the next chapter of my life would be. Like Joan, we both went to law school, graduated, passed the bar. I had been teaching at Salem State at the time for about 13 years, taught a class every semester, I still do, and trying to figure out what was next for me. At the police department, I felt like I had done everything I wanted to do. I got the department accredited, which is the gold standard in policing. Had created some special units, like the CIU unit, street crime unit. I had done everything I wanted to do. And I made probably one of the quickest but most impactful decisions in my life. When John Keenan called me to let me know he wasn't going to run, I went home that day, and it was just a regular day, and I said to my wife, John's not going to run again. And she said, geez, he's been great. John's a great guy, was a great rep. And I looked at her and I said, I think I might run. I said, but if I'm going to do it, I have to decide quickly. I decided that night.
There was a scrum going on at the time.
Yeah, and there was probably a half dozen people, I think, that were interested. And I said, what's the worst could happen? If I lose, I'm still the police chief, and I'll still come to work every day and give it my best. And I just thought people bring different skills and different lived experiences to a job. And what I had done through most of my career was I was in detectives, 17 years. I was a captain. I ran the Criminal Investigation Bureau, had dealt with people through all aspects of the good, the bad, and sometimes the really bad. And one of the things that was a constant for me, a theme, was public service. And I knew that whatever I did next, I wanted to continue in some public service. The only thing I'd ever run for before was class officer when I was back in high school, and had never thought about running. But I always liked politics. I always paid attention to it. Watched what happened in DC, watched what happened on Beacon Hill, watched what happened at City Hall. So it was basically kind of a confluence of events that brought me together, and it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
Well, I'll say this to both of you. You both really seem to enjoy what you're doing.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily see that in a lot of other elected officials. They may say that they enjoy what they're doing, but they don't act like they enjoy what they're doing. When I see you guys, you really seem that like you don't mind getting up in the morning and going out and doing whatever you have to do, whether it's be visiting the seniors, going into the State House for meetings or anything like that. A typical day, you have to go to the State House. Now, your typical State House day, how does that start for you?
So a typical day is, usually in the State House pretty early. I just want to give a shout out to our staff, because we both have amazing staff. They work really closely together, and I think that's the support behind us that really allows us to be able to do these jobs.
Very much.
So we're in the State House typically at 9 o'clock. So we're in the hour and a half commute in the morning to go 15 miles to Boston, and it's meetings all day. Right now we're doing a lot of Zoom meetings mostly. The State House is closed presently, but we're working on a reopening plan. I happen to be on a reopening working group in the Senate to get us back in after Labor Day. As you can imagine, it's a very big building, a lot of people, a lot of movement. We need to get the public in, get everybody moving safely, especially with this Delta variant that we're now battling with. It is a course of meetings, pretty typical, right? I'm usually signing up about 8 o'clock at night, usually if I'm going to be in the district, I'll be doing this from home. It'll be a district day, so that I'm in and out of my home office, and typically on Zoom. But I will tell you, one thing about this working from home, being forced to work from home, we've become even more efficient than we already were. I can fit probably 10 meetings into a Zoom day, as opposed to maybe a half a dozen in the State House.
You don't have to move anywhere.
No, and and people don't have to come in and find parking and try to navigate it and get in. Again, we're not open right now. Physically, we're not open, but we're more than doing our business right now. So, that, and then really pretty much we're working 7 days a week. Yeah. Weekends are very heavy with district events that we want to get out and see people and hear what people's concerns are, and then be able to act on them.
And your day probably similar, early start?
Yeah, I agree with everything Joan said was right on point. I would just add that I guess there's really two aspects to the job. One is kind of the forward-facing, where the public sees you, and they'll see us today. Joan and I will be at the Senior Center. We'll be at National Night Out tonight from 5 to 7. I think people want to see their elected representatives. They want to be able to have human, physical contact, shake their hands, tell us face-to-face what's happening. We do a lot of that, and I think that if there's anything that we do right, both of us, we are out there. If we get invited to something, we go. Case in point, there was an Eagle Scout ceremony a couple of weeks ago, and both Joan and I had a conflict. We had other political events. So we contacted the families and said, we can't make it on Sunday, but you know what we can do? We can come to your house on Thursday night. So we went, had a wonderful event at both Eagle Scouts' homes. It's important. It's important to them. Now, in the scheme of, world politics and state politics, it might not be the biggest thing, but it was important to them, and we made sure we were there. The other piece of it, and maybe what the public doesn't see as much, is our committee work. Both Joan and I are very busy in committee work. I'm on the Transportation Committee, and I think people know all the work that goes along with that. I'm on Ways and Means. We've been working on the budget, and we just finished the state budget. The governor just signed it. This year, for the first time, I'm on the Mental Health, Substance Use and Recovery Committee. Fascinating, and I feel like I've been using some of my police experience there. I'm also the vice chair of regional government and municipalities. The amount of work there, right, we have a great chair, Laurie Ehrlich from Marblehead. I'm her vice chair. We've been doing some really strong work as well. And both Joan and I feel, and I know because I've seen her, she's been on committees with me, both of us, if we're on committees, we're all in.
Yeah.
We get there at the beginning, we stay to the end.
Right.
I've been in State House hearings that started at 1 o'clock and are still going at midnight, and I stay to the end. If people come across the state and they want to be heard, they have a right to be heard. And both of us, I know we feel the same way. There's a lot of stuff that's unseen. Now, I think with the State House being closed, I think some people, unfortunately, are under the impression, well, we've all just kind of taken some time off.
Yeah.
This pandemic's been 7 days a week. I did emails last night until midnight, and I already did a few this morning. It's the unseen part of the job. I got an email last week. Somebody said, don't you think it's time you went back to work? All I wrote back was, I've been working 7 days a week, and I know my colleague has as well. It's a lot. It might not be the stuff that gets the headlines, might not be in the front page of the news, but what we're doing is important to somebody, and I think we both take great pride in that.
It's one of the things I've often pointed out to people when I was on the council, and even since then, when they complain about a city councilor or a mayor or even a department head taking too long to get back with them, especially on an email. I would ask them, what time did they send it? When they got back with you, what time did they send that email? Go, what do you mean, what time? I go, take a look. What time did they send that email? I said, I don't know. And then I'll have a look. And then they'll call me a little later and go, my God, that email was sent at 3:20 in the morning.
Yeah.
I go,
Yeah.
they're busy.
Yep.
They're busy.
Right.
Yeah, they should return your email.
Yep.
There are
Yep.
going to be occasions when it's going to come back late, but you got to look at that. Why is Senator Lovely sending me an email at 3 a.m.? Because that's really the only time she's
Right.
gotten a minute to do that.
Yeah, and there is a lot of that, Bill, and what we've seen, particularly in this pandemic, is people that have unemployment issues.
Yeah.
Our staff has done incredible work trying to navigate the bureaucracy. Just this week, I helped 3 separate people with passport issues. Now, it's a federal issue,
Yeah.
but we work very closely with Congressman Moulton's office. 2 of them were very time sensitive. One was an out of country wedding, and one was a custody issue that we had to get the child back to mom in another country, and it was all very time sensitive. We got it done. It took a lot of work, each one of these cases, but we get it done, and we do it because this is what we enjoy. We enjoy helping people.
I was just talking to somebody at Brothers next door when I was getting my tea. He's going crazy waiting for his passport to come in.
It's a lot.
He says it's a longer wait than it is for the driver's license right now.
That's true.
But
true.
the bureaucracy is there anyway.
Yep.
It's always been there. COVID only made it worse. Now, you both touched on legislative meetings and committee meetings. How many committees? You each sit on 3 or 4, or is it more than that?
So last term, I was on 5.
Yeah.
That's unusual.
That's a lot of
Right.
committees.
Right now, so transportation is a very, very busy committee, very busy. Vice Chair, Municipalities and Regional Government, we handle anything that has to do with the administration of government, which is very, very busy. It's been a lot of work. The Mental Health Committee, we've already had 5 hearings, and some really, really not only interesting issues, but life-altering issues for some people. And, you know, we don't have to tell anybody the seriousness of the opioid epidemic and what we've been doing in that space. Our Attorney General, by the way, I think has done some incredibly great work as well, holding some of these companies accountable. What we're dealing with is on the front end. It's the folks that need help. I can remember several months ago, I was in line at the bank Saturday afternoon, and a woman came up to me and said, I've been on the fence about calling you. I wasn't sure if I should call you. She had a daughter with some substance use issues. I got her into a rehab that afternoon. And because one thing that I think both of us have had a lot of success is developing a network of contacts and finding out who we can make a phone call to. We got help. Sometimes things can wait a little bit. Sometimes it's immediate. And that's the job. You don't walk away from that. People are counting on us to do it.
You know, Paul, when I first got into the Senate, I was the chair of mental health and substance misuse, and that was a policy area that I didn't have any background in, didn't have any education in, you know, so I was like a doe in the headlights when I took over that committee. I'm so grateful that then Senate President Therese Murray gave me that committee, because I learned so much, and that's a strong policy area for me now. And again, you know, we get the same calls. We help people to get into rehab, and so, you know, it's just it's a great beginning. I think when I went into the Senate, I have the incredible honor to be an assistant majority leader now in the Senate, and so I'm on a lot of Senate committees. I'm the vice chair of Bills in Third Reading. I'm a member of Steering and Policy. And I also have the good honor to be able to, actually a new committee for me, 2 new committees for me, this joint committees, Global Warming and Climate Change. Couldn't be more timely. I'm so grateful to be on that, led by Senator Cream on the Senate side. And then Joint Committee on Housing. I have a housing background my whole career. I've been a realtor, you know, for my whole career. And now I'm on the Housing Committee, so I'm grateful to be under the leadership of Senator John Keenan, Senator John Keenan. From Quincy for that committee as well. And again,
that other John Keenan.
The other John Keenan,
that's
right. And so we've been, again, hearings are underway, and we're a little limited with hearings because of our IT capacity. You can have 3 hearings a day. Usually if we're in the building, we're 6 to 8 hearings a day. So these hearings are really going. Judiciary just met, and I'm not on Judiciary, but you were on Judiciary.
I was for 6 years. I'm not this
6
term.
years,
I
3
was,
terms.
yeah.
And those are, the Judiciary gets the most bills. And those are 12, 14-hour hearings.
We've had, I'll tell you a quick story. So my first term, there was a hearing in Judiciary. Rep. Ehrlich had filed a bill to ban the importation of ivory.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that.
Seems like a pretty non-controversial, you know, not that we have, you know, poaching in the United States, but kind of make a stand for other countries. It became controversial. That was the longest hearing. It was 13 hours long. 13 hours. Who came out? Museums, secondhand valuables, musical instrument repair people. They need ivory. Who would have thought?
There has to be a practical use for just about everything out there. And,
Right.
And Joan's right that, you know, that was a judiciary bill, and they traditionally will have hundreds and hundreds of bills. I don't know how many bills were filed this year. Generally, I think it's around 7,000 for the term.
Yep.
And each one, not everyone they'll have the opportunity to have a hearing. Some people may not show up for it. You know, some of the very, very non-controversial ones. But many people come in, they want to be heard. We had on mental health last week, I think we had 60 or 70 people testify. Each person gets 3 minutes. Generally, many go over. Right. So you can just multiply that times how many hours that hearing took. But people have a right to be heard.
Well, in the last 3 minutes, we've hit on like 4 really hot button issues. Mental health being really one of them. But what you did touch on was housing. And obviously, in the political climate in Salem today, I can't just let housing fly by.
Yep.
Big issue in Salem right now. Big issue across the state. In reality, a big issue in the country. I was reading how Wyoming and Idaho are having housing issues now because of all of these people that can afford to move into those large western states are doing that. They're walking up and they're offering people double and triple their home values just to sell on the spot. We don't have quite that issue in Salem, but it's similar. So very controversial proposal is out there to build housing down there in the Zatella Lane, Memorial Drive area. It seems that the housing authorities are not what they used to be. The funding isn't there. They're not going to be building buildings like they built across the street here in the early 1970s.
Right.
It seems like the public-private projects are the future. Do you think that's the case? Is it really not viable for the states and the cities to be building this housing on their own now? Is that the approach we're going to have to use going down the road?
You know what, when I first got on the city council, so Ward 3 included, up behind Shaw's, and there's a parcel of property up there that the Housing Authority owns.
Very familiar with that.
Yep, and they were taking a look at that to build more Housing Authority property. It required a lot of blasting, a lot of site work, and it seemed unreachable at the time, but it's there. Now you talk about Satella Lane, now another opportunity to take a very old complex and to renovate that. Into what, though? You have to consider density of the neighborhood, traffic movements. We look at Footprint, who had put forward just a really soft proposal about putting housing on that 40 acres right there. But again, impact. You know, we've got, I mean, our streets were, you know, horse and buggy streets. Derby Street's not very wide, so have to really look at the impact and how, the infrastructure that can support some of these more denser, you know, developments. Public-private, absolutely. Right now, you know, developers, and I'm not saying anything bad, want to maximize their you know, their profits. So
of course they do.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And but I tell you, I just sat last Friday with a woman in Beverly, a constituent, who is disabled. She's in a first floor apartment, but there's still some stairs to get up, and she needs to be something even more level, just a couple of stairs to get into her unit. She can't find anything. She's been looking for a year and a half just to find a unit. And it doesn't, she's not in a wheelchair, so she doesn't need that type of accessibility, but she needs something that's better for working for her. And she can't find it. She wants to stay in this area. She's been, you know, lived in Salem, you know, for a long time, likes Beverly now. But we're running into these situations where there's such a shortage of housing and rents are so expensive.
I have a friend in a similar situation who coincidentally is now living in Beverly, right by the tracks.
Yeah.
She moved, she needs a walker to get around. She moved 4 times in 5 years within Salem and Marblehead before she finally found this Beverly place, which is more accessible. I'm almost thinking this might be the same person, I don't know.
Really?
It is difficult to find, especially accessible housing for people that need it. But we need housing for seniors. We need housing for the disabled. You know, we used to have dedicated housing for veterans and stuff like that. There's no reason not to upgrade the buildings down there at Satella Lane, but how do you do it and where do you do it?
Yeah, so I was a Rainbow Terrace kid until my parents were able to afford a house in South Salem. So we got our start in Rainbow Terrace, and it worked. My parents were able to save enough money to achieve the dream of buying a home. But we got our start there. I think the first thing we need to do is acknowledge the fact that we have a problem. We have a public housing problem. Joan and I get calls from people, can you get me on the list? The list right now is between 8 and 10 years. If you signed up today, you're looking at close to 2030 before you get on, absent some exemption, you know,
Right.
widow of a veteran, something like that. So we acknowledge there's a problem first. The second thing we have to acknowledge is we have an infrastructure issue here. We have traffic, as Joan said, we have density issues. I worry greatly about the water supply, another issue that we've both been working on.
Huge issue nationwide.
Huge.
We've been working on that. So now, let's move to the part of, we acknowledge there's a problem, we've got to get something done. So the days of the government building standalone public housing, those days are probably gone. We haven't built anything new in Salem in, I think, decades, probably.
I think it's across the street.
Yeah.
It's the newest. That's 74.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we look back that far. So how do we strike that balance? And I think it is a balance. This shouldn't be a lottery win for private developers, and it also shouldn't have to be that folks trying to get into public housing have to continue to wait. So I think we've got to find what that balance is. Now down at Satella Lane, I've seen some of the issues. A project like that probably doesn't work anymore. They're very low, single stories.
Not enough units.
Not enough
Right,
units.
right.
But how do we, and by the way, we don't want to displace the folks that are there. So they've got to get some type of a guarantee that they're going to get taken care of. So I think there's a way to do it. I don't know what it looks like, but you know, it's like the old Supreme Court justice when he talked about pornography. He said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And then there's projects for me that are non-starters. I saw something the other day. There's a proposal on Derby Street where there's a little store now. Somebody wants to build 4 or 5 stories. To me, that's a non-starter. That shouldn't even be considered. That ruins the neighborhood. It ruins the aesthetics of the neighborhood. It ruins the quality of life. And you know, you can't put a price on quality of life, but you have to do something about it to make sure that we take care of these folks. So all of these are in the mix. I can't tell you today, Bill, as we sit here exactly what that looks like, but I know what it doesn't look like. And I think we need to get some good people around the table and take into consideration all of the things that I think people are worried about, legitimately worried about: traffic, water infrastructure, the densities, schools, everything.
And there are no simple solutions.
Yeah.
They don't exist.
There aren't. But you know what? You mentioned schools, right? So, next street over from me is St. Anne's School. It's not abandoned. The Archdiocese still uses it on a very limited basis.
Yep.
I look at St. Mary's. We look at St. James. Now, I think St. James is cited for housing.
Yep.
I think St. Mary's is supposed to be as well,
cited,
right?
yep.
So these are opportunities, especially for a senior building with supports in place. It's very important to have supports in place, and it's not hard to do, because you know what? We're baby boomers, right? So we're in there. Where at some point, maybe 15 or 20 years from now, when I'm in my 80s, am I going to want to have some type of supportive housing, and is it going to be there?
Yep, good point.
Well, it's like I said, there are no simple solutions, but thanks for that, because that is an issue that people are very concerned with.
Yeah.
We touched on committee meetings and legislative meetings and all the work that you guys do, but that reminds me of, I don't know if this is a gotcha question or not, I really don't think that it is, but the state legislature is still exempt from open meeting laws. How much of an issue do you see that as? Should that continue? Is it time to step away from that? And how big of a process is that going to be? But more importantly, how much would that slow down the legislative process if suddenly everything was subject to the open meeting laws?
Yeah, that's a good point. And Joan, you chaired.
I've worked on this
Yeah,
issue a lot.
I know you did.
Yes.
Yes.
So I actually, in my office, open meeting, but also public records. I was the chair of State Administration and Regulatory Oversight, 3 sessions ago when we rewrote the public records law to be able to allow, again, better access to public records. And the legislature is exempt from that, as is the administration. So we actually spun a committee out of that. I didn't chair that committee, but I sat on it and made some recommendations, which the Senate has adopted. But we're still not in full compliance. We told, with this rewritten legislation, we told our cities and towns, our municipalities, our public employees, how they needed to comply. And we still don't comply to the full extent that they do. I think we should. I have actually my own office policy that, are you looking for something? What are you looking for? If it's something to do with a constituent, I'm sorry, you can't have it. That is sensitive information,
Sure.
and I don't want to chill a constituent calling us for help, whether getting into rehab or whatever it might be. I don't want to chill that. So anything like that is off limits. But what are you looking for? I may have that document, and I'll supply it to you. I was just in a meeting the other day. Someone was looking for some records on the Holyoke Soldiers Home and what that's going to look like. And
That's a subject near and dear to my heart.
yeah, I'm sure, absolutely. And there's some documents that were, a study that was done through the administration. I was able to secure that and supply that to the constituents, so that this is the information that we should put out there. Open meeting law. Again, when we did the conference committee for that public records law for under state administration, we did that conference committee in public.
Yeah.
We made that very intentional. We had everyone there, the ACLU, the Mass Newspapers Association, anybody, that advocate or interested person who wanted to weigh in, and they actually made the legislation better. They put in all of their ideas, we incorporated it in, and then we passed that law. So I think there is, again, on the legislative side, there's going to be some sensitive information that maybe that's an executive session. But
Sure.
there should be opportunities where we are participating in public so that people can see the work that we do.
Yeah, as the police chief, I strictly abided by the Secretary of State's guidelines that starts with the premise, all public documents should be open, unless some exemption applies. I know now, since I've left the police department, there's exemptions, further exemptions, for instance, on domestic violence, not releasing the names now either of an arrestee or a victim, because if you put the arrestee's name in there, it could lead to the victim. I understand that. I also think that we should allow the public to see everything that they have the right to see, with the exception if it's a private email, let's say from somebody, a family member who's seeking mental health or substance use disorder treatment for another family member. I don't think the public has a right to see that. We can get to it. But Bill, you raised an important point in your question about what would this do to legislation. And we just took a vote in the House, and I know some people are upset about this under the transparency rules of the House. And one of the things that I actually kind of came back around again was committee votes. Now, a committee vote is a vote whether to move a bill forward or not. And currently, the public has a right to know who voted against moving it forward. So there's only two other things you can do. You can vote for it, or you can reserve your right. And at first blush, my thought was, well, the public has a right to know, I voted for it, I voted against it, I reserve my right. But I did talk to a lot of my colleagues who've been around, and I hope this doesn't get too in the weeds for the viewers, but oftentimes you're concerned about the language of a bill. Now, you may favor the concept of it, but you might be a little troubled by the language. So you may reserve your right and say, look, I want to wait until this gets flushed out a little bit. Or you may say, you know what, I'm going to vote for it now to move it forward. But if it changes as it goes through the process, I may be against it. What happens then is you may get a constituent who says, oh, Paul Tucker, that's good. He just voted in committee for this. But when it hit the floor, he voted against it. He flip-flopped. What they don't realize is the original bill has to go through sometimes 2, 3, 4 committees. It's changed dramatically by the time it hits the floor. So it may change to the extent that you no longer support it. And from the outside looking in, it said, oh boy, he completely flip-flopped on that. When it's actually just the difference in the bill is something you don't support. Joan's the vice chair of a very important committee that I think it's one of the most important committees that people don't know about. It's called Bills in Third Reading. And it's the final stop before a bill hits the floor. My friend and now retired colleague Ted Spiliotis from Danvers was the chair on the House side. That's a very important committee. It's where they check the legislation, but by the time it hits there, it may have changed from the original. So just to address the point you made, and it's a good one, the open meeting law and the ability of the public to see how people vote on it, there is a little bit of a nuance in there where sometimes you might be my colleague from Pittsfield and I say, Bill, look, I really hope that you support me on this, legislation A, B, and C. And you may say, you know what, I'll help you with it now, but if it changes going forward, I'm not going to be with you. And I think that's where some people just make a little bit of misinterpretation of what we're doing. I hope that explains it enough.
Well, it doesn't, but I think a lot of people, they don't understand how it works. It's one of the pieces of advice that I give to anybody that tells me they're thinking about running for city council. Is I always ask them, have you ever been to a city council meeting?
Yeah.
And I said, well, you need to start going. If you're really thinking about this, you need to take a while. You need to go to some council meetings. You need to go to some committee meetings. And Councilor Toriel likes to call it, watch how the sausage is made. Yeah. And you do, because it's complicated. Things can change. And there's a lot of arguments over language. How many times, I lost count of how many times in city council we had long and convoluted discussions about will as opposed to shall.
Yeah.
What does will mean? What does shall mean? And I would just sit there and shake my head. And I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why we were discussing this. Yeah. But to some people, that's worthy of discussion.
We just passed in the House, it's actually over in the Senate now, a sports wagering bill. And that bill, there was so many additions and subtractions in it, and the chair of the committee that heard it was Rep. Jerry Paracella, who did a fantastic job getting this through. But it got down to so much of the nitty-gritty that some reps didn't want to put college wagering in, some did. And then they got down, they said, well, you can wager on the team, but you can't wager on individual performance. Right now, when Tom Brady starts in September, you can make a bet of he'll throw more than 30 passes in a game, or he'll complete his first 3. What we were worried about was the pressure on college athletes, so for individual statistics, so we took it out. And then some of our colleagues came forward and said, well, there's a simulcast in there, so you can simulcast greyhound racing from other states, which, by the way, we dispense with. We got rid of it.
It's illegal here.
Massachusetts. So should we simulcast it? Should we not? So they said yes, but they'll put a sunset on it. That's just one small example of how that one bill changed so many times in a short period to get to a consensus.
And gambling is such a complicated thing.
Extremely.
You know that's it's going to change as we go down the road anyway.
You know what, I wanted to circle back really quickly to, somebody running for city council. Once you get on the council, if you have the good fortune to be able to be elected, The rules are really important. So when I was on the city council, I had the incredibly good fortune to be under, a mentor of Lenny O'Leary. Lenny knew the rules. Joe O'Keefe knew the rules. These were really great city councilors. So I made it a point to really learn the rules. Matt Vino, when he was a city councilor with me, Matt learned the rules. Now I'm chair of rules in the Senate. The rules are very important. It's dry, but it's important that we know how we run a meeting and what rules we need to comply with. We agree on the rules every session. We pass temporary rules, and then in fact, the joint rules are still working on our joint rules. But the House, you passed your rules, the Senate passed our rules. Rules are important because it really just gives us, that not just the guideline, but how we conduct ourselves and how we conduct ourselves as legislators. I will tell you, in the Senate and the House, it is a very respectful process. Yep. It's a very clean process. It is, when we are asking to speak, we're being recognized. The lady from Salem, for what reason does the lady rise? It's a very respectful, purposefully respectful process, because we know that the issues that we're dealing with are very emotional. And we may have some emotion about them and some really strong feelings. We make sure that doesn't come in to the process, and that we make sure that we are debating on the issue itself. When we walk out the door, we're shaking hands, even though we may have been on the other side of the issues from each other.
That's very important, everything you just said, and I think, and this is an observation from me, not from anybody else, I think over the last 10 to 12 years here in Salem, on our city council, with the various characters, including me, that have been on there, I think we've lost sight of that more than a little bit. I don't think we have a lot of councilors that know the rules these days. There are a few, but I think that the respect has gone by the wayside a little bit. One of the first things that I think was Artie Sargent that said it to me, but might have been a couple of others, was that no matter what we discuss on this floor here today, when the gavel hits and we walk out as friends.
Right.
We forget about that. And I really think that over the last 10 to 12 years, our city council has lost that. You guys don't have to agree with that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm saying that. And I personally, I find it kind of embarrassing. But that's me. I don't think that we have that respect. It's good that we have it up at the legislature, but the traditions still exist there. I think we've lost that tradition, and I'm hoping that we can get it back in the next couple of years, because it's important. And that kind of leads me into, we basically covered question number 2, really, but I just want to touch on a little bit. You two occasionally, well, you work together a lot, but there's sometimes where you work together a lot more on a particular issue, and you also work together with your other colleagues, Peabody, Beverly, Marblehead, and Swampscott. What drives that? Is it just particular issues, or is it has to be some personalities involved also, but what really drives you at deciding you're going to work with Paul, or you're going to work with Lori, or you're going to work with Jerry on an issue?
I think a lot of it has to do with who we are as people. I had Jim Smith, who's been around politics a long time, was a state rep years ago, he's a lobbyist now. He said to me last year, he said, "This is the strongest North Shore delegation I've ever seen." And that's a high compliment. Yeah. And it's something that we work really closely on. We get together, we just did a breakfast Zoom last week on talking about some of the infrastructure that we present a united front. And we work really closely together. And I think that speaks well for all of us. And I think, frankly, Bill, the people want to see that. They don't want to see, what's happening in D.C. They want to see the elected officials work together. And it doesn't mean that we always have to agree. We have my Republican colleagues. I'm very close with the whole North Shore area, right up Lenny Mere up in Georgetown, Brad Hill, Bruce Tarr. We collaborate on things. Doesn't mean we have to agree, but we work together. We're working with Bruce Tarr and Brad now on some of the water. Infrastructure bills. It also might be on the different types of issues. Laurie Ehrlich has done some really strong environmental work, done incredible work on gas leaks. That's important here. We do a lot of work with Pat Gazemba and Stan Franzine and everybody from SAFE, and Laurie has an expertise in that more than I did. So I've learned from her. So I think the amount of collaboration that we do is, I think it really speaks well of all of us. And I think, frankly, it helps us regionally. One quick example where Joan and I worked together and got something done was getting the courthouses on Federal Street given over to the SRA. That was about a 10 or a 12 year saga, and we just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And the first call I got was from John Keenan, who called me and said, "How did you do it?" It was Joan and I just kept going back at it, and now the city's going to benefit from it because we have a united front on some of these things, and I think that's a good example of how that can pay dividends. So.
And you know what, too? We also have some flexibility. We're willing to work to compromise, be able to get to the goal that we're trying to get to. Not to undermine what we're trying to do, but each side, everyone's coming from a side, and we need to get to the middle. I'm not going to get everything I want. You're not going to get everything you want. We're going to compromise and get there. And it's all about that. It's communication. It's working together. And Paul, you said this. We're very bipartisan. Senator Tarr is the minority leader in the Senate, and such an incredibly valued colleague. And we don't agree on all the issues, but we are extremely respectful of each other, and I like him, and he likes me, and we really get along in the Senate. And I will tell you, in the Senate, there's 40 senators. 3 are Republicans. And those three colleagues get as much done as the rest of us because we listen to each other, we respect each other, we incorporate the best ideas in. It doesn't matter if it's a blue idea or a red idea. What's the best idea? Let's get that done. Rep Hill from Topsfield, we represent Topsfield together. Couldn't be more fortunate to serve with Rep Hill as my counterpart for Topsfield. We get so much done for charming little Topsfield because of Rep Hill and who he is. And he's a long 25-year legislator. Long time. So Rep Kelcourse.
Great guy.
Mira, as you mentioned. We really work hard at being bipartisan and working on, again, what are the best ideas? How can we incorporate those?
Well, you threw 2 words out there that really hit home for me, which is communication and compromise, which in reality is what built this country. What we did right and what we've done wrong over the years, everything that we've done has been based on communication and compromise. And we seem to have lost the ability to compromise in this country politically, nationally, maybe not at the state legislature, but definitely here municipally. So that really, you just segued us right into the last question I was going to ask anyway, which is our political climate today is just ugly. It's nasty. Nationally it is, even across the state. Here in Salem, it's as ugly as I can ever remember it being, which is upsetting. Is this a long-term trend? Do you think we're going to peak as far as this foolishness goes, or are we going to come to our senses and start working together again, or is this where we're at for the next 10 years?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. It's funny, a couple of days ago, I just saw a video clip of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill at a dinner, and so complimentary of each other and talking about how, they said that they would fight till 5 o'clock and then they would go have a drink together, 2 of them.
Right.
And then about 3 weeks ago, I saw a clip of the Republican Senate leader, and this is a direct quote. He said, 100% of my time and effort is to stop everything that President Biden's trying to do. 100%. And I said, so that means that there is no time, if it's 100%, there's no time to say, let's work together on something. Your question's a good one, Bill. Will it change? I hope so. I use the term collegial at the State House. I think we're very collegial. You know what? We disagree. We have some pretty robust discussions. But at the end of it, I think, and I'm in my 4th term, I've never seen anything get really ugly and personal like I have in other venues. I hope that we can get to a point. I wrote a letter to the editor a few years ago about the climate in Salem, and and basically I think I ended with the great Lincoln quote, "House divided, cannot stand," and I felt that strongly about it. Just the visceral anger that people have, rather than taking 3 steps back and say, okay, you know what, I just disagree with you, but let's talk about it. If we're going to get something done, for the next generation or 2, that's where we have to be.
There's been this country's been divided, for a few years now. It seems like the red versus the blue versus the red. We got to get away from that. And I see that, speaking locally, when I was on the city council, we made it a point to check our motions at the door and to debate what was in front of us and then pick up where we left off and go out the door. Not every city council got along. Every city council term to term is different. People bring, but what I see, people bring a lot of passion to that job and to our jobs. And it's just to be able to channel it correctly so that, everyone is being respectful of each other's time. You're not going to agree on everything, but, just be respectful of it, And so I remember those days and, and I bring that experience up to, what I'm doing now. And again, I'm going to go back to the rules because they're very important. That creates the respect and the demeanor and really the process of how we operate and conduct ourselves in that setting. And so it's just very, very important. One thing I want to add, though, is throw a pandemic on top of everything. Yeah. The last year and a half has been incredibly stressful for all of us, whether you're on the public side, the private side, whatever it might be. That has removed filters for some people. We get some pretty strong emails and phone calls from some pretty angry people.
Sure.
Because the people are raw. We just shut down the economy. That has hurt a lot of people. We're trying to keep people alive. We've lost millions of people to COVID, and now we're going through this Delta variant, and what is that going to look like? I've already put my mask back on in public.
I got one in my back pocket.
Yeah, I've got a 9-month-old granddaughter that lives with us. I'm protecting her. I've been vaccinated, but she can't get vaccinated. So, and actually I was in a store just last week. I had my mask on. I'm in the checkout, and somebody behind me said, "Oh, there the government goes again. They're making us wear our masks." I couldn't tell if it was a joke or not, so I didn't acknowledge it.
Best move.
I just did my business and I left. Yep. But I went, geez, this is my personal. If I want to wear a mask, yep. don't chastise me for it.
Yeah.
So I think this country has some healing to do. I think that the message that comes out of the federal government that I'm going to do everything I can to stop President Biden. That's just nonsense. That's again, it's not working together.
Yeah. It's not working together at all.
For the people.
Yeah. If the barometer of the mood of the public were our emails, you might be surprised at how much anger is actually out there. And I look at my job personally to do the best I can, even if somebody strongly disagrees with me in the worst terms. I've developed a thick skin over 34 years in policing.
Yep.
Otherwise, this job will eat you up. You can't do it. And I'll work just as hard for people that disagree with me. Every once in a while, I feel like saying, what makes you think you can talk to somebody like this? But you have to be better than that. I think public officials have to be better than that.
Right.
And you know what? Maybe that's how we start to stem the tide a little bit.
It's going to be interesting as we go along. We got city elections this year.
Yep.
You guys will be up again next year. And then we got the congressional midterms, which are going to be key.
It's going to be interesting.
Sometimes I think I have some responsibility for all of this because back in the early 90s, I worked for a gentleman who was running for Congress in New Hampshire. It was the year that Clinton first got elected. And he was a Republican, the guy I was working for, and he was part of the Gingrich Contract for America. And I participated on some of those conference calls with Newton. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I remember I had something to do with that. Because I really think that, I don't think it was Newt Gingrich's intentions, but I really think that our issues today, that's where they started. I think that was the birth of it. It was following Reagan and O'Neill. I think that the attitudes we have today were birthed then, and they've just built over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, guys. I worked for a Republican running for Congress, but it was a good experience. But this has to have peaked. We have to get past this.
Yeah.
Here in Salem, in the state, and across the country. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. We actually covered a lot of ground.
Yep.
It usually goes pretty quick. So if you got anything else to say on the way out, this is the time to do it, because then we're going to shut it down.
Just thank you for the opportunity, Bill, to come in to share our thoughts and how we work together, and how state government works. It's a pleasure to work with Paul. Again, a shout out to our staffs. They're just amazing. Yep. And we're just here to work for our constituents. So if anything on people's minds, give us a call.
A lot of the job that I've learned watching Joan do it early on. We started right away when I first got elected. I've learned how to do the job. and that when you help one person, again, in the scheme of things, it might not be the biggest deal, but you've helped somebody. And I do have a feeling every day of how blessed I am to be from Salem, you know, what the people of Salem have done for me. And I'm coming up on 40 years, and if you throw in my working for the city in high school and working at Forest River Pool, about 45 years.
You were doing your civic
Public
duty then,
service.
too.
Yeah.
So it's, I am truly blessed, and I'm every day, not a day goes by that I'm not grateful for the citizens, so.
All right, well,
Absolutely.
thank you very much, Paul, and thank you, Joan. And thanks for watching, Salem. I hope you enjoyed this, maybe learned something. If you do have any emails to send to either one of these guys, be sure to be polite. That's really what the key is, even if you disagree. So this is Salem Digest at the Round Table at Salem Access TV. We're signing off, guys, until the next time. Thank you very much. So now he'll turn everything.